everybody. Zach Dibmars here for Fish Talk Magazine. I'd like to thank you for tuning in for another edition of Live with Lenny. Stick around. We got a very special guest joining us this evening. But first, we're going to dive into the current bite with our angler-in-chief, Mr. Lenny Rudo. How you doing, Lenny?
Hey there, Zach. What's happening, man?
Yeah, good to be back. Feels like these months just go by in the blink of an eye.
Well, the holidays certainly threw a curveball into everything. And then we had that fantastic rockfish bite that threw a curveball into everything. And the giant bluefin bite, which threw a curveball into everything.
Yeah, December was a fun month.
Yeah. And I know you got out with me, what was that, Tuesday? It was just the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And we found some fish, but the bite's not what it used to be. We'll get on to all that in a minute. But first off, we should thank our sponsors for tonight. So thank you to Yamaha Rightwaters, which is all in conjunction with CCA with the Great Invasive Species Count, which is still going on. It's become a year-long event. It's running through, I think, March 31st is the last day. And people, if you haven't heard, it's free to join in. All you do is get on iAngler and take a picture of your catch on a ruler. Your name goes into a hat for a prize. And if you gut the fish and show the stomach contents, your name goes into the hat again. And every month we announce a bunch of winners. There's some really cool prizes.
Absolutely.
And I think we have some tonight. But wait. Should we do the winners or the announcement first?
Announcement.
Go ahead with announcements. Let's do announcements first.
All right.
I love changing the schedule as we're talking, just to confuse you.
We need to fire the producers. So what are our announcements?
The boat show.
We got a big boat show coming up next week. The Chesapeake Bay Boat Show up at Timonium Fairgrounds. That's running next Friday through Sunday. There's going to be a CCA Kids Corner. Captain Steve Griffin's going to be there talking about side scan. Tom Weaver's going to be doing fly fishing demos. You could come talk to Lenny anytime during the show at the Fish Talk booth. So check it out, ChesapeakeBayBoatShow.com. That's Friday, Saturday, Sunday next week. And come and meet the team and check out some hot new fish boats.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. There's no doubt in my mind that if you're a fly guy, you want to come and see Captain Tom. That will be a good seminar for you to sit in on. And Steve, man, if anybody's got the electronics master, especially the side scan stuff, it is Steve. And I know from past years, I assume it'll be the same, they have a big, beautiful screen set up there, and I'll bet it's going to be a feast for the eyes. And I think he's doing it multiple times, right?
I think it looks like there's one each day, different times, but so just check the schedule website, check the schedule. I think he's doing a seminar each day.
Very cool. All right.
Cool.
Now let's pick some winners.
Absolutely. We should also talk about the still time to sign up for the CCA
Pickerel Championship.
That runs through February 28th. You can sign up anytime, and it's a rolling tournament. So you can fish every day or one day. And you got stringers of bass, white perch, yellow perch, crappie, pickerel, lots of different ways to win. You could do fly. They have a new this year is a bank fishing shore category. So if you don't have a boat, you don't have a kayak, but you have access to ponds like Loch Raven is a great place to fish. It's challenging, but there's some big fish in there. So
what's your stringer looking like, Zach?
I got like a couple 24s and a 23, so not enough to take it, but it's a good foundation.
Have you cracked 70 yet?
Yeah, for sure.
That's good. That's a good start. I
was fourth last time I checked, but that's not enough to hold. There's some really good anglers out there, and it's a lot of fun, friendly competition. I strongly encourage everyone to join for a little winter motivation. You won't see me out there unless it's like 38 degrees or more, though. Anyhow, all right. On to the invasives count.
Winners. Let's give away stuff.
Again, register anytime. This will probably reset again coming this spring, but stay tuned. This runs through. Right now, probably catfish is your biggest option. It's a little tough to get the snakeheads in the wintertime.
Right, and it's blue cats, flathead cats, and snakeheads. Those three species are the ones that qualify for this. And we should also mention, as you catch these fish and enter them, the information as to where the fish are caught, the numbers of fish that are caught, the stomach contents, all this goes to the fishery managers. So this is like citizen science at its best. It's free. You go fishing, you take some pictures, you send them in, and then the fisheries managers figure out, where are hordes and hordes of these flatheads? Where are hordes and hordes of the snakeheads? Where are the blue cats? What are these fish eating? So it's a win-win-win all the way around. Can't encourage you enough to do it. And on top of that, you could win. What do we got? What do we got, Zach? Mike Dawson. Whoa, you got the Engel bait cooler. That is a seriously nice prize. Rockin' cool. Mike, I covet your prize. That is a nice one. And Greg Cutshaw gets a pair of the Marucci's. Very nice. These are some nice sunglasses. I got a couple pairs myself. And if the style in the picture isn't your taste, Greg, don't worry, because actually what you get is the gift card. You can choose whatever model you like.
All right.
Robert Sneath II also gets the Marucci gift card. Congratulations, Robert. Very nice.
Now, this is a pretty telling about participation in this, because I don't know if you saw who won that last one, but there was a special membership drive they did last month, and the grand prize was to fish with Tom Weaver. So not only does Greg get the sunglasses, he won a guided trip with Tom Weaver. So congratulations, Greg, and thank you for your membership to PCA. Pretty cool.
Very nice.
So everybody, to redeem your prizes, you can pop over to this website right here and fill out the form, and they'll tell you if you can pick it up, have it shipped to you. With the sunglasses, you'll get a code, and with the cooler, I think you can pick that up at All Tackle, but all that information is right there, and I believe they'll be contacting the winners as well via email. So thanks for participating.
And, I'm not going to drone on about this too long, all right? But just for the record, people, CCA is, as anglers, as an angling community, they are our voice. They're our only voice. They're the only seat at the table with the fisheries managers, with the politicians. They're the guys who are out there fighting for us. And if you're not a member, you should be. When I hear that, they're having a membership drive, the first thing that goes through my head is, how come everybody that fishes out here on the bay isn't already a member? I know from dealing with these folks, they've only got one thing in their mind, and that is maintaining our fisheries and our access to those fisheries. They're not a bunch of tree huggers who are, don't kill fish, don't kill fish. That's not at all who they are. They're not, politically motivated. They're just, their mission in life is for us to have better fisheries and to maintain our access to them, which is critical. And as an example, I would just point to, the no target seasons for rockfish. Even when rockfish catch and release is very, very low mortality, like you almost got to club the fish in the head to kill it, in the cool water. We've been cut out of that at certain times of the year. And there's really no good reason for that. It's honestly to save fish on paper. It's because somebody somewhere can write out on a piece of paper that they think X number of fish won't die if we don't fish for them. And so they shut us out, and they take that number and they use it to extend the season, or maybe give some other people those fish, those numbers. Access is really a critical component to any fishery. And our access, honestly, it's gotten beaten up in recent years. So again, if you're not an angler if you are an angler and you're not a member of CCA, you should be. You're benefiting from their work, and we'll all benefit a lot more if the organization as a whole becomes stronger. So please, people, join, will you? Okay. Zach, let's get to the current bite, because I'm sure people are out there going, what's a current bite like?
Absolutely. I'm going to hop here behind the curtain, and just a reminder, everyone viewing out there, pop up your questions, and we'll try to answer them in a timely, relevant time frame matter. So
absolutely. We want to hear your questions, people. That's why we do this. Just type them right into the comments. Zach will get them up on screen. As we discuss, particularly the trolling motors and the mounting options and the different pieces and parts of that puzzle, feel free to put those questions in. And I want to mention that the whole reason we chose that for a topic tonight was because we got a reader email. And he said, Fish Talk reader, he said, hey, I'd really like to know about this. This would be a good winter project. And I'm curious, how big a motor do I need? What kind of batteries do I need? How can it be mounted? Blah, 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 blah. And so we said, all right, we'll do a topic on it. But first, we're going to go through the current bite. Zach, go ahead and put up slide number 1, please. We're going to fly through these slides. This is, oh my God, I forgot his name. Nick on Mark's boat. He caught a beautiful rockfish. This is from a couple weeks ago. Go ahead to the next slide if you would, Zach. And we're going to see another fish. That's Max on my boat from a couple weeks ago. A couple weeks ago, people, the 40-plus inchers, the bite was hot in the Middle Bay. It was so farther south. It was really, better in the Middle Bay. I particularly love this picture because I get to point at Vadim in the background there and go, oh, look at how much bigger Max's fish was. But be that as it may, there was a really spectacular bite going on. Go ahead to the next slide if you would, please, Zach. This is off the Miss Susie in the Lower Bay. Tackle Box sent this one in. Beautiful fish. There were a number of these beautiful fish around. The bite was getting better in the Lower Bay as it was picking up in the Middle Bay. Go ahead to the next slide if you would, please, Zach. We also had some awesome action at the power plant. That's my friend Glenn with a 28-inch speckled trout. And that particular day, I forget, did we catch 7 or 8 beautiful specks? We only had one that wasn't over 22 inches, and most of them were like 24, 25, big, thick fish, gorgeous fish. But guess what? I was at the power plant on Tuesday. Zach, you were there too. We had very difficult conditions. The way the wind and the tide were, you basically, it almost seemed like you were drifting along fast enough to be on plane. But we didn't get squat. Zach, you did have one interesting event you saw. What'd you see?
What do you mean? I had a big follow, probably mid-30s striper.
Mid-30s?
Follow my spoon right up to the boat and then darted off. So that was
right. So there are some fish there. Like I said, we had real tough conditions, but unfortunately, we were there because the bite on the big rockfish had turned into kind of a lackluster bite on pretty small fish. They were nice round rockfish, but they were 20-somethings. A lot of boats working it. Those fish were off the power plant, scattered around in pockets, and it wasn't super duper red hot. And people, I hate to say it, but to be perfectly honest with you, we really haven't heard about super duper hot on the rockfish bite in the bay since we got that blast of cold 4 or 5 days ago. And I really had hoped that the water temps coming back up would trigger these fish to get back into it. But at least so far, it seems like it really hasn't done the trick. Now, the bluefin have still been around. So if you can get offshore, you got a shot at the bluefin. But now we got all this wind to contend with. And, man, will they still be there after this wind passes by? I can't answer that. I just don't know. It's a big, fat question mark. Beyond that, there's been a good pickerel bite, as Zach was bringing up the pickerel before. We've heard about some in the tribs. That was actually better. Was it early December, Zach, when that was really red hot, I think?
That was November.
November.
As the water cooled, it was like 50 degrees, and then, we're down in around 40 degrees now. It was 37 last week. It was 43 last weekend. So, yeah, it slowed down, but they're still biting.
All right, so we got that to deal to potentially go for, and also I'm sure the mill ponds are happening now. Nathan's asking about reports of larger migratory or trophies in the North Bay. Not really north of the bridge. We had just a handful of reports of big fish just north of the bridge, dumping ground, sewer pipe zone. Back when, maybe 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, when it was best in the Middle Bay. But again, since that cold came in, man, what was that last Saturday? It was so cold and windy. Friday, Saturday, something like that. Since that weather event, I have not been hearing a whole bunch of good reports. Now, today's Thursday. Dylan, our reports editor, Dylan Wooders, he'll be putting together the report tonight, and hopefully we'll have some better news, but it's not what I've been hearing about. What I've been hearing is a much tougher kind of deal. Kevin's saying a slow start for pickerel, but a sunny day and it's fire. Okay. And that holds with, what the pickerel like to do, right? Oh, Dylan. Hey, Dylan. Pocomoke River panfish and pickerel are hot. Good reports out of the area this week. Okay, so that's awesome stuff. And that Pocomoke River is great. Herb's asking if I've targeted the sea bass. Herb, I tried multiple times in November, once in early December. Just was nothing like last year. And since then, I haven't tried because it just wasn't happening. Now, Max Speed Walt, I know he got, I think it was a 16-incher, maybe a week, 10 days ago, something like that. But he said the same thing. It just has not been the way that it was last year. Those fish did not pop up in the numbers that we had them last year. So I don't know. It's kind of like c'est la vie on the sea bass so far. No reports from big stripers on the upper bay. Seems the bite's dwindling along with the middle bay striper bite. Yeah, it's a bummer. I hate to hear it, but it just seems like that quick little cold blast. It did push the bay water temps below that 40-degree mark. And when that happens, those fish go deep. They sit on the bottom. It gets really hard to get them to bite. Even, you can see them on the meter. They're there, but they just won't eat. And I'm afraid that that quick snap did that, and then they didn't come back. I had high hopes with some warm days they would come back. Monday, I had a trip with some CCA folks. Great crew. Boy, did I want to catch fish. We never even dropped a lure in the water. We just never saw a dang thing. And then Tuesday, like I said, Tuesday was a little better, but yeah. So Tom's asking how they compare to a year ago. Tom, it was the same deal a year ago. When the water was in the low 40s, the fish were doing it. They were on fire. As soon as it got below 40, that's when they kind of turned it off. So I'm afraid it may be a done deal, but you never know. If those temperatures bounce a little bit, maybe they'll come back on. And they could come back on at any time if those temps get high enough. So I don't know, man. Looking at the weather, it doesn't look great for the next week, 10 days. Put it that way. Max is asking if moon phases affect the pickerel bite. Wow, Max. That is a question that I can't answer, man. I can't tell you that I've ever really worked on that or looked at that. Zach, you have any insight on that?
Jonathan Bland did an Angler's Night Out a few weeks ago, and he had a whole insight about that. Unfortunately, I had to leave early, but Jonathan Bland is a local light tackle fly guide, and he might have some insight on that. So I'll try to ping him. I'll circle back to you, Max. By the way, Lenny, that's another great angler named Max. I'd love to see Max versus Max someday.
Yeah, that would be good.
Good to see you, Max.
All right. Well, I think it's time to move on to the whole trolling motor topic. And we have, people, a special event. Kind of. Not really. But it's kind of cool. Zach has a video queued up for us that is a little piece of a video that we made on customizing a fishing boat. We did it on my boat. I did a lot of changes to it, post-factory changes that I think made it a much better fishing boat. And this is one of them. Zach, why don't you go ahead and roll that video and let's see it. One of the most critical items on this boat, at least I would say it's one of the most critical, is this Minn Kota, which has got spot lock. It's a tremendous feature. Right now, I've pulled us in tight to a bunch of rock piles that are underwater here. There's some over there. There's some over there. I can park us right in between, hit the button, and we stay put so we can try and catch some fish. So spot lock is a total killer. I'm sure everybody's heard about it. It's fantastic. But it's not the only thing. Zach, go ahead and take us to the next slide, please. Another big advantage that having that motor on the bow does for you is it allows you to creep through areas. And you can't see it here, but there's a line of docks on the other side of the boat. And that fish that Emily is showing there is just one of many that was caught that day. And we just creep along these pilings super slow. I'm talking, half a mile an hour, and it allows you to really work through the different sets of pilings or whatever structure you might be on very, very effectively. Every cast the boat's moving 20 yards, 30 yards, so you can just constantly work along. Highly, highly effective. Go ahead and take us to the next slide, please, Zach. Here's another one, and this is using spot lock again, but not as a method of casting to an item, but to fish vertically. This was a sea bass. I think that was a 16-incher that we got last year. And this is in 60 feet of water, just parking the boat. And it's magnificent because historically you'd have to drop an anchor to do that. Well, that's A, a pain in the butt. B, it makes a ton of noise. C, it gets a boat all messed up, clanging the anchor around. And D, if you don't drop it in the perfect place the first time, you got to haul it up and try again. And it's not unusual if you're fishing over a little wreck to have to try and anchor, reposition 3-4 times. Oh, and then by the way, the bite stops. What are you going to do? You want to move. Well, now you got to haul the anchor and do it all over again. So it is exceptionally rare that I anchor this boat. In fact, the only time I've anchored it was when I went clamming, and another time I burned the battery out because I didn't know that the GFI had tripped at the dock, and I was not charging it for weeks on end. Other than that, I just no need for an anchor. So it's pretty magnificent. You can see there's a little chop here. Yeah. You can see there's a little chop here. I have used this trolling motor on this boat, 26-foot boat. I have used this trolling motor to hold steady in the wash at the power plant. It will actually hold you there. It's working. It's really working when you're doing it, but it'll do it. I've used it in 20-knot winds. It's kind of amazing. All right, go ahead and take us to the next slide if you would, please, Zach. Kevin saying if you forgot his trolling motor, we'll turn around and get it. Yeah, it is killer. Here's another thing that's killer. I've got it interfaced with my Humminbird Apex. Now, what this allows me to do is control the motor from the helm. And for some guys, this isn't a big deal. They like to use the little handheld remote. That's fine. I use the remote sometimes too. But I really like this because I can be at the helm when I have a full boat of anglers and just really dial everything into the nth degree. I can position the boat like I want. I can move it like I want. I can look at how my anglers are casting and say, oh, the guys on the bow are going to have a better shot if I creep forward 10 feet, then stop, and I can do it. It's just really a fantastic ability. Go ahead and take us to the next slide, if you would, please, Zach. Here's another one. You can, when it's integrated with everything, you can see everything. You can, look at your juice, how much juice you got. It's just really, it's a pretty spectacular thing. Now, go ahead and take us to the next slide, if you would, Zach. Here's where we get into the big questions. I've got a boat that is not a traditional trolling motor boat. Can I put it on there? Is that the right slide? How did that happen? That slide is supposed to have 2 pictures on it, and that is only the upper picture. I don't know how that happened. This is Walleye Pete's boat, clearly a non-traditional trolling motor boat, but we got one on there. And we have a special guest to help us understand how this can be. Okay, there's the lower picture. That's with the motor deployed. Zach, let's go ahead and bring in Kevin.
How you all doing?
Hey, Kevin. This is Kevin Conroy. He's a Minn Kota rep, and he knows pretty much everything inside and out. And when I got my boat and I got it rigged up, I immediately made sure to invite him on my boat. And that was not only to get to know the Minn Kota, but also the Humminbird, because Kevin's also a Humminbird guy. He really knows his stuff. So, Kevin, give us some insight on Pete's boat. You've got a big bow rail there. You've got a very non-traditional trolling motor boat. What happened here?
Yeah, so I think I started talking with Pete probably almost 8-9 years ago, and he thought I was definitely a bit crazy. I was still in college at the time, and I said, we're going to put a trolling motor on this boat. He said, why? What's the purpose? I said, well, you can stay in whatever position you want, and you can get rid of those poles on the back of your boat. You can, anchor in 2 feet of water. You can anchor in 200 feet of water. It doesn't matter, all virtually. So on Pete's boat, it was obviously a bit different than a open center console. He's got, a traditional bay cabin boat, a Judge, a Parker, a Steigercraft. There's a bunch of them. And what we came up with on his boat was just to do a aluminum plate that extends off the side of the boat and then lays down the side of his boat while just being, about 6 inches to a foot outside. That's one way to do it. I've also done very, very similar boats where you modify the bow rail and you can fit it in there. I've seen some people fit it off the pulpit before and eliminate the anchor. So there's, as I say, many ways to skin a cat, and this is just one of them. But, it's a great setup. I think Pete was one of the first, guides on the bay really utilizing a trolling motor. And, it's obviously very much so taken off the last 5-10 years. And it's hard to fish without it now. Once you have one, you don't ever want to go back.
Yeah, Chris is saying spot lock's a game changer fishing the shallows. That is certainly true. Hook a fish, hitting a spot lock to stabilize a boat while fighting and managing it as magic. Absolutely. You get to focus on fishing and not have to manage a boat position as well. That is absolutely true. I love creeping through an area, then when someone hooks up, hitting spot lock, going and helping them out, net the fish. And meanwhile, everybody else is casting in the right spot. Zach, go ahead and please take us to the next slide. It's going to show us some of what Kevin was talking about. So here's a close-up of a mount. Now, it looks like the bow rail is actually cut off there. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when it comes to modifying the bow rail, there's a lot of ways to do it. You can see on this boat, they just kind of cut it out and redid the 90 elbow and probably did the same on the other side and then dropped in this metal plate there. But you can also just remove a section about, this big, so the shaft of the trolling motor can clear that and then can come in. And some people will do that just by removing it and capping it. Some people will also do that by putting another piece of piping over it that can slide to the side or rotates on a pin up and down. So there's a lot of ways to make it work with a bow rail without, chopping the whole bow rail up. You can just do a small modification and 99% of people would never even notice you modified it.
So I'm sure a lot of folks are wondering, like, how do I know with my boat? How do I figure this out? And I remember some years ago, right before I sold my Glacier Bay, you came and looked at it, and I thought the boat was so oddball that it would never happen. I thought it wasn't possible. But you put out a tape measure and you figured it out. So what should someone look for if they've got a boat that isn't necessarily traditional for a trolling motor, where they've got a bow rail? How can they figure this out? Should they get the motor and then try it and try different positions and see where it goes? Or should they measure first? What do you do?
So you definitely want to measure first. And Minn Kota also has a what they call a trolling motor selection and boat size guide. And that's going to walk you through your total boat weight, your length, the amount of thrust you want, and the voltage that it's going to be required. Usually that's a great place to start. But then from there, I really like to consider, well, what are you doing with this boat? Are you fishing back bays? Are you fishing lakes? Are you fishing offshore? Because all that's going to come with a different swell, a different, wind, everything in between. So, just for an example, I'll take the, page we got on the website here, which is a boat that weighs 4,600 to 5,500 pounds, is 20 to 23 foot in length. We recommend 112 to 115 pound thrust and a 36 volt motor, and that's what comes with that. As far as shaft length, there's another page for that. We like to basically measure from the bow to the waterline. And if you are, say, 34 to 52 inches, it's going to recommend 72 to 87 inches. I always, always, always recommend going bigger than you think you will need. Because at the end of the day, you're never going to be able to make it longer without spending a bunch of unnecessary money where you could have just spent a little less up front and not have to redo your entire trolling motor. Some of which, like some of the automatic stone deploy ones, get very expensive to change shaft length. So you really want to go bigger than what you want or what you think you want, and you will always be happy. I do a lot of boat shows and people ask me this question 100 times a day. And basically what it comes down to is, a 60-inch motor on Lenny's boat would probably work fine 50% of the time. A 72-inch motor will probably work fine 90% of the time, but an 87-inch motor will work fine 100% of the time. And what that really comes down to,
I gotta get an 87. I need a bigger motor. Come on.
Of course, everyone does, but it really comes down to how much the bow of the boat is going to bounce and where you're going to be fishing. If you're in a back bay and you're on a smaller boat, you can get away with 60 inches almost all day, maybe 72 if it's a slightly bigger boat. But if you're out at the tuna grounds chunking and there's a 4-foot swell or a chop, it completely changes how you're going to use that trolling motor and how it's, going to work.
So
it's never going to break.
Yeah, Greg was just pointing out that now there are much longer shafts available than we had just a few years ago. And that is an important point because 5 years ago, people said you would have been nuts to try this on some of these boats. And we're going to look at some pictures in a minute that will make you think they're still nuts. But just for the record, Kevin, what's the biggest shaft length you can get now?
Yeah, so Minn Kota makes up to 100 inches. I think Garmin is right around the same. I believe Rodan is making a little bit bigger, and I think Lowrance and Simrad are still around 72, but I've heard they have bigger coming. But as far as the Minn Kota front, we are doing up to 100 now. For the last 3 or 4 years before that, it was 87, and now we have that 100-inch offering, which will cover honestly most boats out there.
Yeah. So Zach, go ahead and take us to the next slide. Dave's saying he's having a Minn Kota installed as a Robalo R200 this winter. Will Minn Kota be represented at the Timonium Boat Show? I think you'll be there, won't you?
We will not have a physical booth, but I will be there. You can look for the man with the mustache. I'm sure I'll be walking around a few places, and I will be happy to answer any questions you might have and walk you through, what you need, what you don't need, what makes the most sense based on what you're doing, and all that kind of good stuff.
Cool. Zach, go ahead and put that next slide up because it goes right to what we're talking about. You can see here, this is a pretty big boat with a trolling motor, right? I mean, this is getting a little bit bigger than Pete's. But go ahead and take us to the next slide, Zach, because it gets even bigger. Look at that. I mean, that's a pretty darn big boat. And that's what you were talking about, putting it out on the pulpit. So now you're actually, using an area that used to hold an item that we just don't need anymore. Now, take us to the next slide, Zach. This is just getting sick, Kevin. This is getting sick. And I just want to let folks know there's another picture of this boat that shows it from the bow. And there's a motor on both sides. So this is actually a 2-motor rig. I like this picture because it shows you just how darn big the boat is. Why don't you, Kevin, tell me what's going on here?
Yeah, so this is a 45 Young Brothers. It's called the No Limit. They fish out of just about everywhere, but Ocean City, Maryland, up to Rhode Island, sometimes down to the Carolinas. It's Captain John Azzato. He just finished up this install, I believe, last week, and this was one of the first boats I've done with 2 motors. He gave me some report on how he was using it, I don't know, about 2 days ago, and said it was, holding great. He didn't have a ton of wind and current, but he said it was holding no problem. He said it was even holding on one motor. He did say he was able to spot lock in about 5 or 6 knots of current. He said he was drifting off it a bit, but he was still able to dramatically slow his drift, which can be really important instead of double anchoring. He does a bunch of tog and sea bass and fluke trips. And, if you're good at double anchoring, it is a heck of a skill, but not everyone can figure that out. And it's super important to stay on that piece where a trolling motor is going to keep you within 5 foot of wherever you hit that spot lock button, and it's going to hold you right on it. And it takes some really serious conditions to get you off of it. Nothing you really want to be out in, put it that way.
I imagine that a rig like this takes a serious amount of juice. And this is not what the average person that we're talking to right now is going to be dealing with. But we do hear a lot of questions a lot of the time on just what battery system is appropriate. And I think on average, when you're talking, oh, look, here comes Tommy. What type and size batteries are you using? So on average, if you're talking like a 20-footer or less, you're probably using a 24-volt system.
That's correct.
Once you get beyond that, you're probably on 36 volts, right?
Yep.
So I know what I have, and I know what it does for me, and it is the ticket. But let's take it beyond that. What on average do you tell people about battery power?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of go through the lineup here a little bit and then jump into battery power. But Minn Kota makes motors in 12 volt, 24 volt, 36 volt. I've used all of them, and they all have different uses. I use a little 12 volt tiller trolling motor on my duck boat, and it's great. It's got 55 pounds of thrust, which equates to 12 volt. I used to run a 80-pound 24-volt Altera back when that was around on our flats boat in Florida, and now I run a 36-volt Instinct Quest on our deep V showboat, and they all kind of do different things. But when it comes to battery power, a lot of it's going to come down to, well, how long do you plan on staying out, and what do you plan on doing with that motor?
All day, sunrise to sunset. I'm fishing all day, Kevin.
We're
All
fishing
day.
all day. So if we're just fishing all day and we're using spot lock and lighter current and nothing crazy, your motor is not going to be working very hard. The trolling motor scale of speeds basically goes from 1 to 10. It doesn't coordinate to miles per hour or anything like that. But usually in spot lock in a normal day, we'd all want to be out there. You're working between 1 to 3. It's very low, and that draws a pretty limited amount of amps. Now, when you're on speed 10, that's going to draw 50 amp hours. So you can run down a 50 amp hour battery super quick. So if you want to just get it right out of the gate, I usually recommend 100 amp hours of battery power. So that could be, 3 group 27s or 31s in series, or it could be a single 36 volt lithium battery, which has become super popular now. I personally am just running a single 36 volt 50 amp hour battery. I'm yet to kill it, but I also have a 4-month-old kid, so I don't get to fish sun up to sundown as much as I'd like to.
That's understood.
It's usually just fishing the windows I get, and that works pretty well. But if people really want to get it right from the beginning, you can do that 36 volt 100 amp hour, or you can do a 36 volt 50 amp hour. And then if you find, hey, this isn't enough, you can pick up another one and put them in parallel. And that's going to, roughly kind of math wise, double your amp hours and, get you right to where you want to be.
As does lithium ion. I got to say, I've got a 80 amp hour, 36 volt lithium ion, and I can't kill that thing. Like, I can't even come close to killing that thing.
And lithium is,
spot locking in 20 knots of wind for hours. It's just, you can't touch it. So talk to me a little bit about the difference between the lithium ions and the lead acids.
Yeah. So lithium and lead is it's very different technology. So lithium, they can get a lot more power in a smaller package, which then comes in a lot lighter. And most of these saltwater boats have not been designed to incorporate 3 extra lead acid batteries on top of the house and start battery you probably already have. And finding space for 3 more batteries is usually a pretty big pain. So that's where that 36 volt single lithium comes in. And lithium as a technology works in theory a lot better than lead in that it drains all the way down, where lead does not drain all the way down. And because of that, you lose some of your, battery capacity. So with that said, you might need this for lead, but you only need this for lithium because you're using the whole thing. It's the same as your phone. Your phone goes from 100 to 0, but if your phone was run on a lead battery, it would not go from 100 to 0. It would stop around 40, 50%. And
a lot of phones go from 100 to 30 and then 0.
Yep.
Boom.
Very quickly.
Which these I am so impressed with mine. I can't even tell you. Like I said, I can't kill it. The only time it's ever died was when I wasn't charging it because the GFI popped. That's it. And I fish it pretty darn hard. Matthew's saying he's running a 72-inch when the valve is 22 Grady. And it's been the best fishing investment I've ever made, running 3 lithium 100 amp hours. I'm not surprised to hear him say that. I mean, it's spectacular. So one thing that I'm sure comes up often, and I know every boat is different. This is, Kevin, I know this is going to be a hard, if not impossible question to answer, but a lot of guys immediately go to, where do I put these batteries?
Yeah. So I've seen just about every different way of doing it under the sun. Some boats have a super deep anchor locker, and you can put in a little platform to, drop in your single 36. Some boats have a bunch of bow storage that actually works really well, and then you can keep your cable run real short and not need as big a gauge wire. Some guys just load up their console. I personally don't like that because I'm always tinkering with wiring on my boat, and I don't want to be sitting on 5 batteries while I'm tinkering. A lot of people who don't have the room at all, say they have like a 18 or 20 foot privateer and there's no storage on it, you put it in a cooler. Put a plug on your cooler, bring your cooler on the boat, take it off the boat. It works great. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. I'm not going to say any are right or wrong. There's some I prefer more than others, but they all they all will work at the end of the day. And I actually have a lot of customers I've talked to who don't have power at their dock. And, you know, that cooler setup works great for them because they can just take it right off the boat, charge it at home, bring it right back. No problem.
I'm a little upset, Kevin, because now I know what to do, and I have to buy another trolling motor and battery for my skiff.
Yep. There you go.
I didn't know what to do. I thought I couldn't do anything because there's no outlet there and I can't charge it. Okay, now I got to get a cooler and batteries. It's just, I'm going to have to do that. But what about the charging part?
So the charging part, you know, there's a million different chargers out there. Minn Kota makes one, and then there's, you know, hundreds of others, NOCO, Marineco, there's a bunch of them. And they all make a pretty, you know, solid product. One of the things that it comes down to, in my opinion, is waterproof. Most of us are fishing from a center console or a cabin boat or whatever it might be. It probably gets some saltwater exposure. So you want to get a good waterproof charger. And then from there, you know, it's matching your voltage. So are you doing a 36 volt system, a 24 volt system, a 12 volt system, a 36 volt standalone lithium system? And a 36 volt lithium system consisting of 3 12 volt lithium batteries versus a lithium system consisting of a single 36 volt lithium battery are going to require different charging systems. And the 36 volt standalone charging systems, in my opinion, still have some work to go. They're usually, you know, Chinese cheap looking charger that is definitely not marinized and waterproof. But I think that market is going to really take off in the next year or two. There's going to be a lot of new products coming out regarding that. And it'll make it a little bit easier for everyone. I currently, with my 36 volt boat battery on my boat, I take it off the boat and charge it at home because the charger scares the hell out of me and I don't want to burn the boat down. But it kind of all comes down to how you feel about the product. And then, you know, these batteries have gotten so light, all it takes me is disconnecting 2 terminals and then I can carry my, you know, 25-pound battery off the boat.
So I'm gonna go in the opposite direction on you. One of the things I love the most is putting the boat on the lift and then just taking the extension cord and going boop, and that's all I got to do.
And that's it. That's the best.
love that. And my boat has a setup where there's just a plug in the console, and I can just take the extension cord and plug it into that plug. I just stick the end of the cord into the console, and that's it. That's all I have to do, and I love that. The convenience factor is huge. You're young. You got a young, strong back. You can worry about carrying stuff. I don't want to carry anything. I just want to stick that.
That is the way to do it for sure. I just I got a free lithium charger and I'm not sure I trust it. So besides that, that is how I used to set up all of my boats. And the part you're talking about is actually a Minn Kota MKR23, which is just literally a little, you know, circular cutout plug that your plug off your charger sits in, and then you run your extension cord and you are done.
I may have gotten that piece from you.
I think so.
Yes, I love that. I think that is the bomb. I really do. So we've talked about the mount, and we've talked about the batteries, we've talked about the charger. You know what we haven't talked about that is in a lot of people's minds? Cost.
Yeah.
Right? So there's always, everybody can look up the cost of the motor. That's not a tough thing to do. And they're not stupid expensive. I mean, you know, they're not stupid cheap, but it's not that huge a deal. If you own a boat, you can probably afford to get the trolling motor and the battery and the charger. But I think a lot of people probably are wondering, this is one of the questions that came up in that reader email. What's the difference between I'm going to put it in and I'm going to pay, I don't know, who's going to rig it? Is BOE going to rig it? You know, is a different outfit that's going to charge me going to rig it? If they're going to do all this work, if they're going to cut the bow rail, you know, how much is that going to balloon this cost versus if I just, you know, figure it out and do it myself?
I apologize for my dog. First off, he will not shut up here, but
okay, we like dogs. We like dogs.
Yeah, no, it can vary a lot, honestly. So most electronics installers today are making anywhere between, you know, $130 to $250 an hour. It's a pretty big range, and every install is very different. On my previous boat, I had a custom plate fabricated, That plate probably costs $400, and you got to powder coat it and do all this stuff. So it can definitely get up there. I mean, a usual trolling motor install is going to be anywhere from 8 to 24 hours. If you're getting real fancy and modifying the fiberglass work on your bow, which I've seen some beautiful installs done, it's going to be closer to 24 hours. If you're just taking an aftermarket bracket like a C swivel or a shuttle slide or a C bracket, you can really cut down that time and cut down a lot of the custom fabrication costs. And some boats look like they're almost made for it, where others look like they don't belong. If your boat looks like it's kind of made for it and you got a big open area in the bow with, you don't have to move the cleat or you don't have to move the navigation light, and you can just kind of plop it on there, get your angle correct where it's laying down the gunnel and not hanging outside the boat or inside the boat. It's not terribly hard, and it can usually be done in a day or under a day.
So what we're basically talking about here is a couple few grand.
Yes, I mean, anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000, depending on how crazy you want to get, really.
So for someone with my old back who doesn't want to lean over and fight stuff, I would call that well worth it. I just want to say for the record, I mentioned BOE. They came to mind because they actually rigged my boat. And I got to say, if anybody is local to where I am in the Annapolis zone here, they did a fabulous job. I could not possibly have been happier with, what they did on my boat with all the electronics. They did the whole package.
BOE does a fantastic job. They do a ton of trolling motors. They're a great customer of ours. They've supported us from day one, and they're definitely experts at installing some trolling motors. And what's great about them is they've done so many boats that they kind of understand. You call them up and say, "Hey, I have a 25-foot Grady White." Well, we did one of those, a month ago. What do you think about this install? Do you want to do it this way, that way? So they're a great resource and provide a ton of information.
I love what they did. I really do. Zach, did we miss a question? I thought I saw one pop up at some point that we didn't get to. So feel free to throw that up if that's the case.
We've got lots of questions, actually. That
boy.
Kind of holding because just waiting because, we were kind of shifting from topic to topic. So actually, since we were just on batteries, I got a question for you about just what would be the best charging method for a boat that is stored on a boatel?
Ooh, wow. Good question.
We used to actually keep our boat stored in a boatel in Florida, and I think they let us charge it in there, if I remember correctly, or I would ask them to put it in the night before I was going to go fishing and plug it in then. Your other option would be to keep a charger of, whether it's a 3-bank charger for 36 volt of 12 volt batteries, or a single bank charger for a single 36 volt standalone lithium, and just keep it in your garage or shed or house and just bring the battery on or off if they won't allow you to plug it in while it's on the rack.
I got another thought on that too. I know, I guess every boatel's different, but I know the one down here, when you bring in your boat after hours, there's a tie-up dock, and you tie it up at that dock and leave it there.
What I did.
Yeah, bring an extension cord. Overnight, that sucker's going to charge up good.
Yeah.
And then by the time they pull that boat out in the morning and stick it back in the rack, you're good to go. I guess you may have to talk with them ahead of time and say, "Hey guys, I'm going to have an extension cord on there. Please, take it and wrap it up and put it in the boat." But I would think that would work pretty good too.
Yeah, that's a great option. They're usually pretty flexible with you. I mean, most of these boatels run a pretty good operation, and that's one of the best ways to do it. But that is what I mainly used to do. Or, it costs a lot more money, but you can really oversize your trolling motor bank to where you can get like 8 uses out of the thing before it dies, and then find some time to charge it. But there's a few different ways to do it, and it definitely does not eliminate you from having a trolling motor.
Of course, you realize the boatel, being, boatels, they are going to hit you with a bill. They're going to charge you like $3 for the electricity you used to charge your batteries. You can bet on it, right? Am I right?
Oh, yeah. It got to be profitable somehow, right?
Yeah.
So, guys, we had some questions about models. So I'm going to throw up Herb's question first. I'll Altera versus Tarova. He has 2 Tarovas, was concerned about potential issues with the auto deploy, which he experienced on a friend's boat. He was 2-part question. Another question is he's interested in the new brushless motors and the pros and cons of the new Instinct stuff.
Yeah. So the Altera is no longer being made in a saltwater version. That name is transferred over to the Instinct Quest, and then the Tarova is still being made. Anything you see with the name Quest is going to be a brushless motor. They are definitely much more quiet. They got, I think it's 30% more torque, so they definitely have a lot more power, but they do come with a, pretty significant price tag. And, there's pros and cons. If you want an affordable trolling motor that's going to do everything you need, but you're going to have to work a little bit to put it in and out, the original Tarova, the non-Quest version, is excellent. I think the Instinct Quest is light years ahead of the old Altera. I was just talking to Captain Walleye Pete today. He's been running that motor for 2 or 3 years now. Actually, he was one of our testers way back when we started testing the product before launch, and he has had minimal to no issues. Today, he literally just called me, telling me how excited he's been. He didn't think he had a single issue in the last year. Pete used to go through a ton of Alteras, so it is a night and day difference. Most of the errors I have heard reported are all self-inflicted. Captain Steve Griffin can tell you this weekend, his co-captain Drew ran into an oyster shoal. That did some damage. I personally hit a rock. That did some damage. But I have not heard of many just
come on, man.
So
what about the auto deploy part of this equation?
Yeah, so the auto deploy used to be what people were scared of. And to be honest with you, I used to predominantly sell Tarovas because they were very bulletproof. I have so much faith in this new auto deploy Instinct Quest that for I think it's a $500 upgrade if you compare size to size, I would do it in a heartbeat. I mean, it's night and day. It's so much easier, especially if you have a tower boat or a pilot house boat where you're going up and down, or you don't want to run to the bow. It makes a big difference. If you're a bit older and don't want to be wrestling the thing in the boat. Now, a manual stone deploy motor is not that hard to get in the boat, but a boat like Lenny's, where you can actually get over top of it, is a lot easier than, say, a deep V center console, where that motor's at your chest height or hip height, and you got to work it up a little more. So I really do believe in the new auto stone deploy. That is not just coming from a sales guy standpoint. I used to sell away from the old one, but now I have all the faith in the world, and we put that through the ringer with guys who used to blow through motors every month, for 2 or 3 years of testing before it was released to the public. And I really believe in that motor.
Nice. And I just want to say hi to Lonnie. I saw Lonnie pop up there real quick with a comment about his and how it's been on him. And now Doug's saying he's got a 23 World Cat for around here. What would you recommend? So as you answer, Kevin, Zach, if you want to pull up the other slides, I actually grabbed those parts of the website that they give you the tables here.
Yeah. So on a 23-foot World Cat, I would, a 72 is going to work, but an 87 is always going to work. And that's where I just immediately go to. If you have that typical bay chop we're all used to when it's blowing 15 to 20 and you still want to be out there, that 87 is never going to come out of the water. You can save a few bucks and go 72, but once again, do you fish, when it can get a little rough out, or do you go back to the dock? And that's kind of what it comes down to. You're definitely going to want a 36 volt model. And when you get a 36 volt model, if it's a brushed motor, it's going to have 112 pounds of thrust. If it's a brushless motor, it's going to have 115 pounds of thrust. So you basically have, 4 motor options. You got the Tarova Quest, and then the Instinct Quest. There's a few different variations of that Tarova, but I guess you really have three options, and they'll all be great for you. It just depends if you want to step up to that Quest price tag and then possibly go auto stone deploy, or go to I call it the previous generation Tarova, but it was still updated when we released all the new motors last year. And that motor is still great. I mean, we've been selling it forever. It's bulletproof. That's what Lenny's running. It's an awesome model.
I've worked that motor. I've worked that motor hard and run it into many things, actually. Mostly not rocks, though. Softer stuff. Trees, bottom,
Yeah, it does pretty well on that. When you smack a rock and you actually land on it like this instead of just running into it, it doesn't do too bad. But honestly, a minor repair, you can take it to your local service center and they'll get you back on the water.
So Greg's saying interesting innovations on electric small outboards, something to stick on a 14 to 16 John boat. Also, the weight of the batteries affecting ride. Well, the weight is going to affect the ride, and that's why you get into that whole discussion. Do I put it in the anchor locker? Now I'm putting the weight up front. Do I put it under the console? That has its downsides, but now we're centering the weight, so that may have a little less effect. I do want to point out the lithium ions, you're talking literally half the weight. And that was the main reason I went with lithium ion. I wasn't even thinking as much of capacity as I was about how it was going to affect the ride of the boat. Because in the Camus, you have a bow compartment just aft of the anchor locker, underneath of the bow stowage compartment where the batteries go. If you're putting in lead acid, that's a ton of weight to put
up. A whole nother body. It's a whole nother person on the boat.
Right. And right on the bow. And so that was why I said from the get-go, I'm doing lithium ion. The other thing is, I don't know if I want to just point out, we probably shouldn't call these electric outboards, because there are electric outboards, which are really a very different beast. And I have one. I have a e-propulsion. It's the equivalent of a 3 horsepower outboard. And I tell you, on a 14 to 16 foot John boat, it's fabulous. I have it on a little, it's only 10.6, but it's a poly boat. But it gives me twice the range, almost twice the speed, but twice the range of a regular electric. The downside is now you're talking about a specific outboard unit with a specific outboard battery, right? It's a self-contained battery system. You don't have any of this other stuff we're talking about. It's just propulsion, right? The electric outboard does not have spot lock. The electric outboard does not have integration with the fish finder. So it really is a different beast. It's a propulsion motor. If I had things, if I had my druthers on my mini boat, I would have the electric outboard for propulsion and the Minn Kota on the bow for the fishing. They're really totally different animals. So just want to stipulate that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I personally run a little 55-pound thrust tiller mount motor on a 14.6 Gnu, and it's definitely lighter than a John boat, but it moves it great. I have a 36-volt one I'm waiting to test, but I'm waiting to get another battery. And I think they're all good options, but what Lenny's talking about with like Mercury or Yamaha or some of these companies that are actually making a little outboard now with a self-contained battery, Torqeedo's another one. That's probably your better option. I think we're going to work pretty good, but even our tiller mounts don't have spot lock, just because at the end of the day, spot lock's designed to work on the bow of the boat because that's how the current breaks around the boat. You don't really want your boat being pulled from the transom. So it's a little bit of a different beast, but it is a nice, affordable route to go instead of some of those more expensive e-propulsion motor offerings.
Now, Lars is saying cost and confusion. Lars, I love the way you started that. So he's looking on Bass Pro, Mega Down Imaging, iPilot, blah, 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 blah. So I got the feeling, Kevin, I want you to address this, but I got the feeling it looks to me like, Lars, you're looking at a motor that has an integrated transducer, because you're pulling in down imaging. So now you are getting into a little bit of a different world with that, right?
Yeah, totally. So this kind of comes back to selecting a motor. So in the salt water, we really have 3 motors that I would recommend for a bow mount, which is a power drive. That's going to be your smaller John boats, your whalers, kind of your under 18 foot usually boats that, you really want to get into spot lock, but you don't want to spend $4 or $5 grand on it. Then you have the Tarova, which is just an all-around fantastic motor. And then you have the Instinct Quest, which is going to be basically a Tarova with that automatic stow and deploy and a bunch of power and all that good stuff. On the freshwater side, which is what you're looking at, you have the Ultrex, the Fortrex, and a bunch of other motors. When you get into these motors that say iPilot Link US2, you have mega side imaging, mega down imaging, anything with sonar capabilities is going to be a freshwater motor. Minn Kota does not make a saltwater motor with a transducer built in the head of it. So if you are looking for a freshwater motor, it all kind of comes down to what you want. Side imaging is going to have side imaging, down imaging, and 2D imaging all built in the head of that unit, as well as the transducer you probably have on the back of your boat. So if you had a screen on the front, you can network that to that front transducer. If you had a screen at the console, you can do that to your back transducer. And then you got, sonar right at the bow of the boat where you're fishing, as well as sonar at the back of the boat for when you're running. But that really all depends on what motor you're exactly, or what boat you're really putting it on and what your use case is going to be. If you want the cheaper freshwater option, that is usually going to be a US2 motor, which means it just has traditional 2D imaging. And US2 stands for universal sonar. So that means it's going to work with a Humminbird, as well as we have pigtails for a Garmin or a Lowrance, or, I think even a Raymarine. But it all depends kind of what you want to get out of that. I personally don't use a ton of sonar on the bow, even when I'm fishing freshwater, especially with the, I don't know if you want to call it invention or whatever you want to call it, of live imaging. I think that kind of blows everything else away. And that would be personally what I was using. And I don't like when it's attached to the trolling motor, because if you're in spot lock, then the thing's sweeping back and forth. But it really comes down to, what exactly you are trying to do with your boat. And if you want to put in another comment, I can hopefully, dial you in a little more when we.
You made me curious about something, because you mentioned the whole issue with spot lock and real-time imaging. And Humminbird does have a system with a separate pole mount, right? The pole is kind of parallel to the motor. Can that be done on a Tarova, on a saltwater motor?
Unfortunately, if you're talking about the target lock, that unfortunately can only be done on a Minn Kota Ultrex. I really hope in the future we can do something like that, because I think it's pretty cool technology. But in the saltwater, I've actually reverted to transom mounting a lot of the live transducers, and it's pretty cool because it's shooting, 70 to 100 feet in front of where your 2D sonar is. So if you want to creep up on some fish and not spook them, you can turn your engine off before, you can trolling motor up to them. You can pitch your jig in front and watch it fall through. But there's
that live imaging has really taken off in certain scenarios.
I was going to say it hasn't really taken off in the salt yet. I think the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel is actually the number one area for live imaging in the salt water. I've seen more people, spade fishing and tog fishing and
redfish.
Redfish, yeah. I mean, I had a blast with it this summer with the redfish. Half the time you're losing on side imaging.
Slow down, Zach. What are you doing, man? I missed like 3 comments there. Gosh dang it! Can you bring it back? Okay, thank you. Joe's saying if you're in trouble with the shaft breaking, ooh my. 8 shaft, and I believe watch a sway a good 7-8 inches under load. No, I mean that they're made to flex, aren't they?
Yeah. So depending on which model you have, which I have a feeling, unless you got it in the last year and a half, this is probably one of the original motors, and that's a fully composite shaft that is designed to flex. And if you were to have any issues with it, we actually offer a lifetime warranty on the shaft. So that is the only thing on the motor that has a lifetime warranty. But I have seen like a very, very, very small amount of issues with shafts breaking. It's usually people hitting something. And now the newer Quest motors have a carbon fiber infused shaft. So anytime you see a Quest motor, it's going to have a black shaft, usually a white motor, but a black shaft. They can also be black, but that's one way to tell. The shaft feels a little different. It looks a little different. And those aren't going to flex as much because they're carbon fiber.
I know where Joe's coming from, because the first time I stood on the bow in a really heavy current and looked over at the shaft, I was like this. Yeah, like that thing is bending, but it's supposed to do that.
Yeah, no, they're designed to do that entirely. I actually I have a very weird use case for trolling motors, but I love using them at Blue Angels every year. You watch everyone try to anchor around you, and I'll put out my trolling motor, have a buddy or two raft up with us. It'll hold us no problem. And I was next to my neighbor this year, and he had his out, and it was, scoped out, and I had one of the new ones on there, and it was barely bending. So the newer ones don't really bend as much. I don't think one way is right or wrong, by the way. It was just when we went to those longer shafts, we needed to add some carbon fiber to add even more strength, just because, a smaller shaft is not as hard to, strengthen as a really, really long 100-inch shaft. So
cool. All right. I think there was one more. Oh, any option on?
I don't think I've ever heard of half swing motors.
Me neither. That's a new one to me. Zach, did we miss one other comment too? I thought there was. Lenny, Kevin, I'm a huge MK Spotlight fan, but often experience losing lock and heading accuracy in autopilot. Huh.
That is a new one. There are software updates available. If you go to the Minn Kota website, you can download software and send it over to the motor, and that might improve it. The other thing I'd be curious about, if you have a heading sensor on that boat, how close is it to anything magnetic? But yeah, no, that is a interesting one for sure. You can also bring it to any of our service centers if you just type in Minn Kota ASC, which is Authorized Service Center, and you can pop in your zip code from there, and it'll populate all the service centers around you. But the first thing I check, if you have anything super magnetic and metallic around that heading sensor, and make sure there's nothing interfering with it there. And then a software update's another great option as well.
I haven't had it happen with the Minn Kota, but I had literally on Tuesday, a bunch of guys got on the boat and put a bunch of stuff in a compartment, and my autopilot didn't work. And I was like, oh, I know what happened.
Yep.
Metal will throw that stuff off.
No, I had someone called me the other couple months ago on it. I forget what it was, but they'd put a bunch of metal jigs right next to it, and it was screwing it all up. And it can definitely do it.
So Tommy's saying, check out the Autopilot Smart Head. You can turn a bunch of motors into a GPS motor with Spotlight. Huh. Well, that's pretty wacky.
Cool. Yeah.
Huh. Nathan saying his Maxim has US2. Didn't realize that was considered fresh water. What would happen using it in brackish water? Oh, that's a question for you, Kevin. What do you say?
Yeah. So the one thing is, if it's very obviously used in salt water, Minn Kota will kind of fault the warranty depending on where you go to a service center. You might have more luck than others, but my whole thing with it is, as long as you wash it down with fresh water, which it's a boat generally at the end of the day, you should probably do so anyway. You should be pretty good. It's not really, water's water at the end of the day. It's just salt makes stuff corrode, but as long as you give it a good wash, the components in it are just going to be a little bit different than a saltwater motor. So it's going to be less stainless steel and that kind of stuff, but it's not going to just up and break. I mean, it's still made to be used in a water environment, but there definitely are some components in the saltwater motors that make it better for that environment.
Now, I got to say, I guess it would have been the early 90s or maybe the late 80s, I had a Minn Kota that was a freshwater motor, and I used it in saltwater all the time, and I killed it.
Oh, really?
Yes. Now, it was the late 80s, early 90s.
I've been running my little tiller mount one in saltwater the last year, and I haven't had any issues yet, and I'm very bad about washing it off because it's usually during hunting season and the water's frozen.
Well,
but
things may have been different 30 years ago. I don't know, but... Herb saying, why does a Minn Kota offer a saltwater motor with a built-in transducer? I added a second garment on the bow of my boat and networked it to my console unit. Purpose to see electronics while fishing off the bow. So why don't they, or will they in the near future?
Herb, I agree with you. I am unfortunately the lowest man on the totem pole when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I don't have all the say in the world, but I would like to see us offer something in that range. I'm not going to say we never will. It's definitely a question we get asked enough, and I think it's worth considering. One of the major reasons is when you start adding transducers in, you quadruple your SKU count, which makes it pretty hard for dealers to actually stock the motors, and then it makes it even more confusing for the customer to figure out what motor they want.
Just like Lars was looking at.
And so many people in the saltwater their entire purpose of having a trolling motor is spot lock, where a lot of guys in the freshwater are using it for a million different things. And I have a feeling even regular sonar, whether it's 2D, side imaging, down imaging, will not disappear, but become less and less popular with the boom of live imaging. Because at the end of the day, if you can point a transducer to wherever you want to look and have it give you a live feed, it's going to be better than anything else.
Interesting. Zach, how are we looking on questions? Because we are 10 minutes over time at this point.
I can go as long as you want, Lenny.
I think we're all caught up. So,
Woo! All right. Well, let me just see. Let me just make sure we didn't miss anything that we talked about. Really, the only thing we didn't get to was tips for using them. Cool things that folks might not know about. I'll start off with one right off the bat. As the flipping autopilot is amazing, because you go somewhere like Jane's Island where you got scattered timber across the bottom, you can set a waypoint, tell it to take you there, set it at like a crawl, and then walk away and just start casting. And you don't have to worry about it. You know, it's a lovely thing. What else you got, Kevin?
I think what you just said is fantastic. And I also use that for other purposes. Like if I want to go, a quarter mile away or something, and I'll actually bump my speed up, but then I'll retie my lures. So I know my trolling motors keep me there. I'm not going too fast to where I'm going to hit anything or anyone, but it gives me an opportunity to do that. I use it a lot for dumb things that I'm not going to say are special features or anything, but you're waiting to pick someone up at a dock and you don't want to be banging off the dock the whole time because there's weight. I'll spot lock 10 foot off the dock and just wait for, whoever's coming out with me to get down there. We have some other cool features. Jog is one of my favorite ones. So while you're in spot lock, if you tap to the left or to the right or forward or backwards twice, it'll move you in 5 foot increments. So that's always, helpful, especially if you are doing something like tog or fluke or sea bass, where you're working a piece of structure and you want to kind of eliminate it all in small increments. Tying it into the Humminbird is really cool. You can mark a waypoint on your Humminbird on structure, tell the thing to go right back to it. I use that all the time while I'm retying a lure. On the new Quest motors, we have a really cool feature called drift mode, which is also, once again, great for, fluke fishing, where you can actually create a drift upwind if you want, or you could have your boat walk this way or that way and kind of really do exactly what you want, sort of how a drift stock would work, but way more accurate. So that's a really cool new feature. We have circle mode. I mean, there's a ton of little features that are probably pretty heavily underutilized, to be honest. But they all do a great job. One of the other new things on the Quest motors that's pretty cool is that battery monitoring screen that Lenny had up way earlier in the presentation. So you can track whether you have a single 36 volt lithium or a 24 volt, lead acid battery in series. It'll monitor all of that and give you your, runtime for the rest of the day, when you're going to run out of battery. Just all sorts of cool features that give, the user some confidence that they have enough battery left for their day.
Now, let's not lose Michael's final question. Final question. What is the best time to get a great deal?
It's a great question. We rarely discount motors. And I guess that's just because of how good they are and how popular they are. One of the best times is whenever we come out with something new and they have to sell off the previous models, which happened probably a year and a half ago. So we probably have a little bit until that happens again. Occasionally we'll do some Black Friday deals. Sometimes we'll do some like spring deals getting ready for the season. But there's no right or wrong time, really. There's no like, oh yeah, every Black Friday we give a killer promotion.
Well, if I go to Minn Kota's website right now and look up the stock website pricing, and then I go to like a BOE or whatever and say I want to get this motor and put it on, is that really, are those numbers solid?
Yeah, so when it comes to the trolling motors, at least the big ones that most of us are talking about with spot lock here, they're all going to have what's called MAP pricing. So they have a minimum advertised price, and that's, in theory, what should be the lowest price you find online. Now, from there, all your accessories, for the most part, do not have a MAP price. So someone like BOE always offers incredibly competitive pricing, and they're not looking to make a ton of money off you. So you might save a couple $100 on the accessories versus, buying directly from Minn Kota. So Minn Kota is always going to sell at the highest possible price. We really try to push the product to our dealer network. At the end of the day, Minn Kota wants to ship pallets of motors, not single motors. So, any of your authorized marine electronics installers are great places to buy. Bass Pro does a decent job. West Marine sometimes has some stuff. I know people love their West Marine points, their Bass Pro points, but at the end of the day, I really think the best option is to go to, a really trusted marine electronics installer, someone like a BOE Marine, who does them on a weekly basis and can get you squared away, and make sure you get in the right motor. I'm also happy to size out anyone's boat, recommend what, you should or shouldn't have. Feel free to send questions into Lenny. He always passes them along to me, and I try to get them answers as soon as possible. So if you do come up with anything, you want to say, hey, I have a 24-foot Parker, which I don't think they make, so a 23-foot Parker. What motor should I get? Send it on over to them, and I can give you a list and tell you all the components you need. While I'm on that topic, for a normal trolling motor install, for components, you're going to need the trolling motor. You're going to want a quick release bracket that makes it so you can take it on and off the boat very easily. You can usually take one of these motors off a boat in under a minute. You're going to want a quick connect plug, so that one end goes on the trolling motor, one end goes to your battery bank. It almost works like a wall plug, except it's super marinized and waterproof. You just disconnect them, disconnect that bracket, and your trolling motor's off. The only other thing you really need is a circuit breaker, which is a 60 amp circuit breaker, which will protect everything. Then you have a few, other pieces like a onboard charger, as well as that little saltwater plug outlet Lenny and I were talking about earlier. But with those few components, that's all you really need.
Now we've got one final question, which we can't ignore because it is from Dave. And you can't really see it, but you can see in the little icon thingy of the picture of Dave, he's holding a big old rockfish, and right behind him is
looks like
the
a trolling motor.
So he's asking, what's the best trolling motor to install in a kayak for spot lock?
Yeah, so there's a few options. The one I would probably go with off the bat is the Power Drive. It's going to be a bit lighter. It's going to have spot lock now, and that's kind of going to be your get-in trolling motor. Your other option is Minn Kota also owns Old Town Canoe and Kayak. They have some really, really cool kayaks with built-in trolling motors that kind of drop right in where you'd put a foot pedal. And they all have spot lock, which I think is incredibly cool. They're a little bit pricey. Yeah.
I didn't know they had spot lock.
Yep. So it's very, very cool. I still have not bought one myself, but I'm on the edge of my seat waiting to get one here. And I just think it is, pretty cool technology, and it makes it so it doesn't really take up much of the boat. Honestly, it just kind of drops right where your foot pedal would. And, if you're looking to upgrade, it's great.
You're not talking about the pedal drive that is lithium-ion electric assisted.
No. There's one that literally has like a little trolling motor head, and then it drops in, and then there's a prop and all that down below, and it is very, very cool.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, the lithium one. I think that one you're talking about came out this year. I don't know a ton about that one, but
it looks really cool. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they make a great product. I have another model before they came out with the spot lock one, so I'm due for an upgrade here. Unfortunately, I'm not the Old Town rep, so I don't get the same deal,
All right. Well, now we're way over time.
That's the Sportsman Autopilot is the one you're talking about.
What is it?
Sportsman Autopilot.
Vadim's
buddy actually got one like a year or two ago. But yeah. And a lot of the kayak companies now are coming out with a power pole mount that makes it easier to actually use that 4-bolt mounting plate for trolling motor.
Yeah, there's more and more third-party brackets and all this stuff. There's a lot of great offerings outside of what just Minn Kota builds and makes. I mean, there's a million third-party companies out there beside like all the saltwater mounts, like Sea Swivel, Sea Bracket, Shuttle Slide, those are all great. And then there's a bunch for kayaks as well. John boats, there's kind of everything in between to where almost everything used to be custom. There's now a ton of different offerings that, take that custom price tag out of there, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I put a transom out right on the back of my kayak. Had some fun testing it out. I don't use it. It's the weight's a little heavy. I think you definitely got to go with a lithium battery on a kayak.
Just get a Gino. It works great.
Absolutely. I saw you and Dave with one of those.
Dave Sikorsky, influenced me on that one. I thought if us two big guys could sit in there together and fish, I was in.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
thank you, Kevin, so much. On the website here, MinnCotaMotors.com. You can find a local retailer service provider. And I also want to just thank our sponsor, Yamaha. If you're looking for a Yamaha, head over to Fish Talk Bag. I mean, Minn Kota is not going to get you to the dumping ground. So, they'll spotlock you once you get there, but you're going to need something to get you there.
Of course.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
And I just want to mention, I'm still not 100% sure how to figure out the depth of the fish on the side scan by the distance to the shadow. So I need you to come fishing with me again.
I'll be ready.
Okay.
Anytime. But if anyone has any questions, I will be at the Chesapeake Bay Boat Show most days. I'll probably help Steve Griffin out with that presentation. I'll be walking around the show. I'm sure I will be able to be found, and I'm happy to help in any way possible.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, people, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had a good time. I hope you learned something. That was a really interesting conversation to me personally. And thanks for tuning in.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.